If you grew up going to shopping malls in the 1980s, 1990s, or early 2000s, there was one store that was almost impossible for a kid to walk past. KB Toys. The stores weren't enormous. In fact, compared with Toys R Us, they could seem almost tiny. But somehow, KB Toys managed to cram an incredible amount of merchandise into those little mall locations. Action figures hung from nearly every available hook. Video games were kept behind glass. Dolls, Hot Wheels, board games, stuffed animals, electronic toys, and clearance merchandise seemed to fill every inch of the store. And usually, before you even made it through the entrance, there were bins overflowing with discounted toys. For millions of kids, a trip to the mall wasn't complete without stopping at KB Toys. But the story of KB Toys didn't actually begin with toys. It began with candy. The story begins in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, in 1922. Brothers Harry and Joseph Kaufman started a wholesale candy business called Kaufman Brothers. The company supplied candy and soda fountain products to stores throughout the region. And for more than 2 decades, toys weren't the company's primary business at all. That changed during the 1940s. According to histories of the company, the Kaufman brothers acquired a wholesale toy business from a customer who owed them money. What could have simply been payment on a debt ended up changing the future of the company. The brothers discovered that toys represented a tremendous business opportunity. In 1946, Kaufman Brothers opened a wholesale toy operation in Pittsfield. And by 1948, toys were doing so well that the brothers left the candy business entirely and concentrated on toys. The company that generations would eventually know as KB Toys had begun to take shape. For years, Kaufman Brothers primarily operated as a toy wholesaler. But American retail was changing. During the 1960s and 1970s, shopping malls were appearing throughout the country. Instead of simply supplying other retailers with toys, Kaufman Brothers saw an opportunity to sell directly to customers. By 1973, the company had shifted away from wholesaling and toward retail stores. The new name was KB Toy and Hobby. The name KB was simply a phonetic version of the initials KB, Kaufman Brothers. And the company had found the format that would eventually make it famous, the mall toy store. Instead of building enormous standalone stores, KB could operate in relatively small mall spaces. That meant parents didn't have to make a separate trip to a giant toy store. If the family was already at the mall buying clothes, eating lunch, or visiting a department store, the toy store was right there. For kids, that made KB extremely difficult to resist. KB expanded rapidly during the late 1970s. By 1979, the company reportedly operated around 170 stores, and dozens of additional locations were opening. Then came another major turning point. In 1981, the Kaufman family sold the company to Melville Corporation, a large retail conglomerate. At the time, KB had approximately 210 stores. Under Melville, the chain continued expanding, and the timing couldn't have been much better. The 1980s became the golden age of the American shopping mall. Families spent entire Saturdays there. Department stores anchored enormous shopping centers filled with record stores, arcades, bookstores, clothing stores, food courts, and KB Toys. The company even advertised itself as the toy store in the mall. And that description was remarkably accurate. KB wasn't simply a miniature Toys R Us. Its smaller stores forced the company to approach toy retail differently. The stores were densely packed. Merchandise often seemed to stretch from the floor almost to the ceiling. And because space was limited, KB concentrated heavily on products that could generate strong sales without requiring enormous floor space. Action figures were perfect. So were dolls, video games, electronic toys, trading cards, Hot Wheels, and countless smaller impulse purchases. One of the most memorable parts of the KB experience was the clearance merchandise. KB became particularly good at buying discontinued merchandise, overstocks, and closeouts, and selling them at aggressive discounts. You might walk into the store looking for the newest action figure and leave with 3 completely different toys because they were sitting in a clearance bin for a few dollars each. That treasure hunt feeling became part of KB's identity. You never knew exactly what you were going to find. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, KB became even larger. In 1990, Melville acquired approximately 330 Circus World stores, many of which became part of KB. The following year, KB acquired 136 K&K Toys locations, further expanding its footprint. KB was becoming one of America's dominant specialty toy retailers. But management also experimented with something very different from its traditional mall stores. In 1994, the company launched Toyworks. KB Toyworks stores were much larger than the traditional mall locations. Instead of squeezing thousands of toys into a compact storefront, Toyworks could offer wider aisles and a broader selection in larger freestanding or shopping center locations. It was KB's attempt to compete beyond the mall and more directly with the giant toy retailers. Another major change came in 1996. Melville Corporation was restructuring its collection of retail businesses, and KB was sold to Consolidated Stores Corporation, the company associated with the closeout retail business that eventually became Big Lots. Around this period, the familiar KB Toys branding became increasingly prominent. The chain also leaned further into closeout merchandise, and KB wasn't limited to one type of store. Over the years, shoppers encountered names including KB Toys, KB Toy Works, KB Toy Outlet, KB Toy Liquidators, and KB Toy Express. The company was trying to reach customers in malls, shopping centers, outlet centers, and seasonal locations. KB even moved onto the internet. In 1998, the company launched kbkids.com, attempting to establish itself in the rapidly emerging world of online retail. By the end of the 1990s, KB Toys was enormous. In 1999, the company operated approximately 1,324 stores across the United States and was described as the country's second largest toy retailer. Think about that for a moment. A business that had started as a small candy wholesaler in Massachusetts had become one of America's largest toy store chains. And for a generation of kids, KB was simply part of growing up. You went to the mall, you went to the arcade, you ate at the food court, and at some point you tried to convince your parents to walk into KB Toys. But behind the colorful shelves and packed stores, the retail industry was beginning to change. KB Toys faced competition from nearly every direction. There was Toys R Us, but increasingly there was also Walmart, Target, and other mass merchants. Large retailers could use toys as traffic generators, sometimes pricing popular products extremely aggressively during the Christmas season. KB had another disadvantage. Many of its stores were located inside shopping malls. Mall locations had helped build the company. Now they were becoming a liability. Mall rents could be expensive. Meanwhile, customers increasingly preferred big box shopping centers where they could park directly in front of a store and buy toys alongside groceries, clothes, and household goods. Then came the internet. Amazon and other online retailers offered yet another way to buy toys without visiting the mall. The retail environment that had helped create KB Toys was changing underneath it. In December 2000, KB Toys entered another ownership era. A management-led group backed by investment funds associated with Bain Capital purchased the company from Consolidated Stores. The next several years would become some of the most controversial in KB's history. In 2002, KB completed a dividend recapitalization. The transaction resulted in substantial payments to Bain Capital and company executives, while KB took on additional debt. Supporters of the transaction maintained that KB was financially healthy when the deal occurred. Creditors later argued that the transaction contributed to the company's financial problems. That dispute would eventually become part of the fallout surrounding KB's first bankruptcy. But debt wasn't KB's only problem. The company was still dealing with intense price competition, expensive mall leases, and changing shopping habits. And then came a disastrous holiday season. After struggling through the 2003 Christmas season, KB Toys filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on January 14, 2004. At the time, approximately 950 of the company's 1,217 stores were located in malls. Hundreds of stores eventually closed. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. But KB Toys wasn't finished. The company reorganized and emerged from bankruptcy in 2005, now controlled primarily by an affiliate of Prentice Capital Management. The surviving stores kept operating, and for a few years it looked as though KB might have found a way to survive. But the retail world continued moving against it. By the mid-2000s, the American mall was no longer the retail powerhouse it had been during KB's glory years. Mall traffic was declining in many locations. Online shopping was growing. Walmart and Target had enormous toy departments, and Toys R Us remained a formidable specialty competitor. KB's greatest historical advantage, having hundreds of convenient little toy stores inside malls, had become increasingly difficult to sustain. Then, in 2008, the economy collapsed. The financial crisis devastated retailers across the country. For KB Toys, already weakened by years of financial problems, it was too much. On December 11, 2008, KB Toys filed for bankruptcy again. This time, there would be no comeback for the original chain. The company began liquidating its stores. The colorful displays were replaced by signs announcing, "Store closing. Everything must go." Discounts grew larger as the shelves grew emptier. Fixtures were sold. The remaining merchandise disappeared. At the time of its final collapse, KB still had 461 stores. The remaining locations closed by February 9, 2009. After more than 8 decades of business and decades as a fixture of American malls, the original KB Toys chain was gone. The stores disappeared, but the KB Toys name did not. Later in 2009, Toys R Us acquired KB's remaining intellectual property, including the brand name and website. In 2016, the KB Toys brand was acquired by Strategic Marks, a company known for acquiring dormant retail brands. Then something interesting happened. When Toys R Us closed its U.S. stores in 2018, there was renewed talk of bringing KB Toys back. Plans were announced for a possible revival, including stores that could potentially fill some of the void left by Toys R Us. But the proposed large-scale return never materialized. The brand has continued to attract interest because the name still means something to people who grew up with it. Maybe that's the most interesting part of the KB Toys story. It wasn't the biggest toy store, it wasn't necessarily the cheapest, and it certainly wasn't the fanciest. But KB Toys was there. It was part of the mall. You could be shopping for school clothes with your parents and suddenly see that red and yellow KB Toys sign glowing down the corridor. For a kid, it was an invitation. Inside were shelves packed with possibilities. Nintendo games behind the counter, action figures hanging from pegs, remote control cars, Pokemon cards, Hot Wheels. Clearance bins filled with toys you had completely forgotten existed. And maybe that's why people still remember KB Toys so fondly. We don't just remember the things we bought there. We remember going there. We remember walking through the mall. We remember looking through the glass display case at the video game we couldn't afford. We remember spending birthday money. We remember Christmas shopping. And we remember being kids. The stores may be gone, but for millions of people who grew up during the Great American Mall era, KB Toys remains part of the memory. This is Retail Rewind, where we rewind the clock and revisit the stores, restaurants, and brands we grew up with. If you remember KB Toys, tell us about it in the comments. What do you remember buying there? And what forgotten store should we rewind next?